You know what's a strange feeling. When you're sitting at your desk at like 9 p.m., tired from a full day of work, and you open your banking app just to check. Not because you're expecting anything, just to check. And the number is fine. It's not terrible. But it's also not moving. It hasn't really moved in months. And you just sit there thinking, I'm working this hard, and this is it.
Yeah, and the scariest part of that moment isn't even the number. It's the quiet voice in the back of your head that goes, "What exactly am I doing differently than I was 2 years ago?"
Nothing. The honest answer is nothing. And that's not because you're lazy or you don't care. It's because nobody ever sat you down and explained the difference between staying busy and actually building something. There's a gap between income and high income. And that gap isn't about how many hours you work. It lives somewhere much deeper than that.
Welcome back to our show, where we learn, share, and grow together. Today, we're going to talk about high-income skills, but not the way most people frame it online, with these lists of 10 things you should learn by Tuesday. We want to go somewhere a little more honest with this.
Because mastering a high-income skill isn't just a career move. It's a psychological shift. And that's what nobody tells you when you're starting out.
So let's start here. When most people hear the phrase high-income skill, what do they picture?
Coding, sales, digital marketing, maybe copywriting, the usual suspects.
Right. And those things are real. Those skills do pay well. But here's where I think the conversation goes wrong almost immediately. People treat high-income skills like they're a product you buy off a shelf. You take a course, you add it to your LinkedIn, and then money happens. And when it doesn't, they feel like they were lied to.
Which creates this really demoralizing cycle. You invest time, maybe money, into learning something. You get decent at it. But your income barely moves. And instead of asking why, most people blame the skill itself. They think, maybe coding isn't it for me, or maybe I'm not a salesperson. And they move on to the next thing.
And this is the core misunderstanding. A high-income skill isn't a subject. It's a position you occupy in the market. And the psychology of getting there matters more than the technical content you learn.
Robert Kiyosaki wrote something that stuck with me in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He said his rich dad told him that the most important word in business isn't strategy or capital. It's selling. Not sales as a job title. Selling as in, can you communicate the value of what you do in a way that makes someone feel it's worth paying for?
And that applies whether you're a designer, a developer, a therapist, a writer. If you can't translate your skill into perceived value, you are permanently underpriced. Doesn't matter how talented you are.
And most people spend years getting technically better while completely ignoring that second layer. The market layer, the communication layer, the positioning layer.
Because those things feel uncomfortable. They feel like bragging or selling yourself. And we're not trained for that. Most of us were raised to be good students, to follow instructions, to be humble. None of that prepares you for being paid what you're actually worth.
So let's actually break this down. What is a high-income skill, really, when you strip away the hype?
I define it as any skill that solves an expensive problem for someone who has money. That's it. That's the whole framework.
Say more about that.
Okay, so think about it this way. There are millions of people who can cook a meal, but only a few thousand who can be a private chef for someone who earns $10 million a year. The difference isn't really the food. It's that the private chef solves a specific, expensive problem, time, exclusivity, health, status, for someone who has the money and the motive to pay for it. Same skill, completely different market position.
So the skill itself is almost secondary to who you're solving problems for and what kind of problem it is.
Exactly. And this is where psychology enters. Because most people, when they're building a skill, they default to the widest possible audience. They want to help everyone. And I get it, that feels generous, that feels inclusive. But in practice, it means you end up competing with everyone. And when you compete with everyone, you price yourself like everyone else.
There's a behavioral economics concept called market positioning, and it basically says that how you're perceived changes your actual value, not your technical value, your perceived value. Two graphic designers with identical portfolios can charge wildly different rates if one of them specializes in, say, rebranding SaaS startups, and the other says they do logos and branding for anyone. Same skill, completely different market signal.
And this matters so much because of how buyers actually make decisions. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, wrote about this in Thinking, Fast and Slow. He showed that people don't make financial decisions based purely on logic. They make them based on perception, trust, and emotional safety. When you're specific, you feel like less of a risk. You feel like an expert. And experts command expert rates.
Which brings us to the actual skills. Let's be real about what earns well.
So broadly, the skills that consistently produce high income share a few things. They involve either complex problem solving, high-stakes communication, systems that can scale, or direct access to money flow. Think software engineering, financial advising, high-ticket sales, copywriting, video production for businesses, media and content strategy. Not because those are glamorous, but because they sit at intersections where a mistake is expensive and a great outcome is very valuable.
And here's something that most career advice completely misses. The most dangerous place to be financially is in the middle, where you're good enough to be employed, but not specialized enough to be irreplaceable.
That's so true. There's a term economists use, commoditized labor, and it basically means your work can be substituted relatively easily. You're doing fine, but you're always one layoff or one cheaper freelancer away from starting over.
And the antidote to that isn't just learning more, it's learning more specifically, depth over breadth, almost always.
Cal Newport wrote about this in So Good They Can't Ignore You. He pushed back against the whole follow your passion narrative. He said the skills come first. You build rare, valuable skills, and then you trade those for career capital, autonomy, income, meaning. The passion comes after, not before.
Which is probably the most useful reframe I ever encountered about this, because so many people are waiting to feel passionate before they commit to something, and they don't realize that passion is often the byproduct of getting good at something, not the prerequisite.
And when you get genuinely good at something specific, like really world-class at it within your niche, the income follows differently. It's not linear anymore. You're not trading hours for money. You're trading expertise for outcomes.
Let's talk about the mindset shift, because I think this is where things actually click for people.
The shift is this. Stop thinking about income as compensation for your time. Start thinking about income as a reflection of the value you create and how well you communicate that value to the right people.
And that sounds almost too simple, but when you really sit with it, it changes every decision you make. The courses you take, the clients you go after, the pricing you set, the way you talk about your work.
Because if income is compensation for time, then the only way to earn more is to work more hours. And there's a ceiling on that. A very exhausting ceiling.
But if income is a reflection of value, the whole equation changes. You start asking different questions. Instead of how do I get more clients, you ask how do I become the obvious choice for the clients who pay the most? Instead of how do I work faster, you ask what would make this work so good that people refer me without being asked.
And here's the psychological piece that I find really important. Most people, when they under-earn, carry a kind of invisible shame about it, like they're not smart enough, not disciplined enough, not ambitious enough, and that shame actually keeps them stuck, because it makes them hesitant to ask for more, hesitant to specialize, hesitant to say, I only work with these kinds of clients.
The data on this is uncomfortable. Studies in behavioral finance have found that people significantly underestimate their own market value when they're experiencing financial stress. Your brain in scarcity mode is not objective, it's survival mode. It wants to say yes to everything because anything feels safer than nothing.
And you can't build a high income from survival mode. You just can't. You need enough stability to think strategically. And that's why financial cushion, even a small emergency fund, isn't just a safety net. It's a clarity tool. It gives your brain enough breathing room to stop reacting and start choosing.
So what does this actually look like in real life? Because we don't want to leave this at the philosophical level.
Right. So, step 1, and this is the unglamorous truth, you have to pick one thing and go deep. Not forever, but for long enough. Give yourself a 12-month commitment to one skill in one specific market, not marketing. Marketing for e-commerce brands under $2 million in revenue, not coding. Back-end development for healthcare startups. The specificity is the point.
And while you're doing that, pay attention to what you're actually solving. Keep track of the problems you fix, the outcomes you create, in real numbers if possible. Because that language, I helped this company reduce their customer acquisition cost by 30%. That's how you move from, I do this thing, to, I create this result. And results are what get priced differently.
Then comes the communication part, which, honestly, for most people is where the money actually is. You need to be able to talk about your skill in the language of outcomes, not activities. Not I build websites. But I help service businesses turn their website into their top lead source. Different sentence. Completely different pricing conversation.
And here's something really realistic. You don't have to leave your job to do this. Most people build their high-income skill in the hours around a full-time job first. Weekends, early mornings, lunch breaks. Not forever, not 80-hour weeks, but consistent, intentional hours with a clear direction.
And the money shift. It doesn't happen overnight. It usually happens in a leap. There's a long period where you feel like nothing is changing, and then something clicks. You land a client at double your usual rate. You get referred to someone because of your specific expertise. And suddenly, the work you've been doing in the background makes sense.
James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits, the plateau of latent potential. You're building beneath the surface for a long time before anything appears above it. And most people quit in that plateau because they can't see what's accumulating.
I want to end on something that feels true to me personally. The whole conversation around high-income skills can feel really overwhelming. Like you've missed something, like everyone else figured out a system you weren't given access to. And I don't think that's an accident. There's a lot of content out there that monetizes that anxiety, that makes you feel like you're behind.
And you're not behind. That's the thing.
You're just earlier in the process than you'd like to be. And that's a completely different thing psychologically. Behind means you've lost. Earlier means you're still in it.
There's something quiet and powerful about a person who decides, not dramatically, not out of panic, that they're going to get genuinely good at something. That they're going to understand what the market actually values. That they're going to stop underpricing themselves out of fear. That kind of decision doesn't look like anything from the outside, but it changes everything over time.
And the pressure to do everything fast, to have a side income and a main income and an investment portfolio all at once, that's not a plan. That's anxiety wearing a productivity mask.
The most financially peaceful people I've ever met aren't the ones who moved fastest. They're the ones who got clear the earliest, about what they were good at, about who they wanted to serve, about what they were actually worth, and they just kept going in that direction.
One skill. Done well. Communicated clearly. Pointed at the right people. That's the whole thing.
That's it. No secret. No shortcut. Just clarity and consistency, which, honestly, are the rarest combination in the world.
If you've been sitting on a skill you haven't fully committed to, or a niche you've been too afraid to narrow down to, this might be the week to start.
Not because you're behind, but because you deserve to find out what's actually possible when you stop spreading yourself thin and start going deep.
Progress beats perfection, and the best version of your income is not as far away as it feels right now. Until next time, I'm your host, G.
And I'm B. If you like the show today, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Turn on the notification bell to get the latest sharing we have. We'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and keep on learning. Thanks, and goodbye.